My name is Ka Baird. I'm currently based in New York City. My practice has become very much focused on electronics and microphones and performance. A good friend of mine subscribed to this magazine called Sassy Magazine, which was like a kind of like a magazine for teenage girls in the 80s or early 90s. And it was actually a pretty cool magazine. And one of the things you got when you got this magazine was a little mixtape. And on this mixtape would be like various like alternative music. And there was a band there that like really grabbed our attention called Throwing Muses. It was a band fronted by Kristen Hirsch and her stepsister Tanya Donnelly and two others, 3 women in the band. And there was something that was like very, very, very inspiring about that band and early Throwing Muses, the way they would construct songs. And so this was like a big inspiration for me as a teenager. And then that sort of opened the door to other sort of like mainstream alternative music at the time, of just like we were very interested in women who were playing music, so like PJ Harvey or the Breeders or something like this. And then once I got to college, I met a friend who then, or many friends I shall say, who then busted it way open beyond just like the mainstream alternative world, where I was introduced to so many types of experimental music, of just like really out there, ecstatic free jazz, to like certain minimalists, to electronic music, to noise music. And so like all of these possibilities of what you can do with sound really opened up at that time. I just released a record called Bearings Soundtracks to the Bardos out through the New York label RVNG a couple weeks ago. And so I am performing part of that record tonight. I, over the years, have really differentiated between like a live performance and a recording. And I have a pretty vigorous studio practice, and then I have a very like intense live performance practice. And they meet in some ways, but they're also quite separate. But the performance tonight will definitely touch on many aspects of the record, which is basically divided into 11 gates. I won't be performing all of the gates tonight, but it's basically a record that's inspired by this idea of the in-between, which is the idea of the bardo, which is a Tibetan word which most people think of as the time after death, before rebirth. And so, but actually the word bardo just means an in-between or a gap. So it's like a liminal space in between two things. And so the record itself is this idea of trying to get one's bearings in an environment that's constantly changing. So it's this character I take on in live performance that is both intense and also playful, that's constantly trying to get their bearings. So there's a lot of performative antics. I kind of take this role of this chaotic magician who is not aware or able to control some of their powers, but then sometimes they harness it and it gets into control. And there is an intensity to the performance, but there's also very much like a comic element as well to the performance. So there's a lot of, I play with silence a lot in my set. So there's a lot of like dead silence, which I often will actually tell the audience beforehand because it's something that people aren't quite familiar with. At one point in my set, there's actually just a whole minute of just complete silence. I play with so much silence and it's very intimate, and I like to ideally be very close to the audience. There's no audience participation, but I do like to get kind of close. And at one point I'm sort of scraping the microphone on the floor, and I sort of like to get really close to people's feet. A huge part of my inspiration, a huge part of how I like generate ideas comes from improvisation and putting myself in environments where I'm improvising with other artists without any sort of idea of where it's going to go. And I feel like that's a very important thing in terms of just learning how to listen and learning how to be in the moment. And how to just work in an unscripted way. And a lot of times during those improvisations, I will come up with some kind of idea that then I'll take into the studio, and then I will refine and put into a composition. Sometimes people are like a little afraid of me after I perform, which once they talk to me, they're like, oh, you're actually really nice. But I think sometimes I come across as a little intense, and that has to do with that hyper presence of just like, you know, I'm just like really kind of like not necessarily walking eyes with anyone because that's intense, but like, you know, confronting the audience in a way. And I feel like because I'm giving it so much of my physical self, so much dripping in sweat, that I think this idea of the hyper presence of just like wanting people to be in this moment with me. Everyone's attention spans are so short. Everybody's checking their phone if they're bored for a second, you know, so it's like a challenge to get people to stay focused.